Hi everyone, welcome to Plan First Live. I'm Sean Larkin. I'm the manager of design services at Plan First in Auckland. And today we're going to be discussing kitchen layouts that actually work. So today is a follow-on from what we started with last week when we looked at the do's and don'ts of kitchen design. So today we're going to have a look at an actual real-life example. This was a house that I was involved with a couple of years ago. The owners had bought it. It was a distressed sale. So the house did have a bit of work to do. And one of the things that it needed was a kitchen facelift, redo, remodel. It also was, because it was built in 1970s, I'd say, each room, there was no open plan. Each room was compartmentalized. The kitchen was in a room by itself. Dining room was a room by itself. And over time, the previous owner had added on. So the flow wasn't very good in the house. When they added on, it wasn't planned properly. It was just, added on. So we'll have a look at a couple of examples. I'll show you what it looked like before the time. I'll show you what our thinking is when we go into a renovation. Any renovation, really, the principles of a renovation are the same. It's very different to when you're starting with a blank canvas. If you're building a new build, then, you design it the way you want to live. So it's a lot easier doing a new build than it is doing a renovation. When you're looking at a structure that already exists, a couple of things that we look at, especially with kitchens, is the layout, of course, which we spoke quite a lot about last week, and also the ventilation. Where are the entrances and the exits to the space? Things like plumbing. Where is the existing plumbing? Where is the existing electrical? So we'll have a look at all those things with this real live example that I'm going to be showing you. So let's add this to the screen. Let's go to the first slide. So this is what the kitchen looked like when they bought the house. You can see that it is compartmentalized. It's in a room on its own. On the left-hand side of the kitchen, that is where the dining room is. So it really just had one small door that accessed the dining room from the kitchen. You can also see, I think originally the kitchen would have been spacious enough, but over time they added on this center island, which really wasn't all that practical because you've got very narrow walkways. The stove, which you see in this image, backs right onto the dishwasher behind, which is one of the things we spoke about also last week in our presentation. So this was the space. If you look from the other side, you'll see it had one small little window, and the door that you see there goes into the backyard, and the opening on the right is the opening that goes into the dining room. And this is a tiny little pantry. I think it used to be a passage. So I think they just closed it off, put a window in, and added a couple of homemade shelves into there. So it's really a very unusable space. So we'll show you how we changed this to actually make it functional so that the new owners could use it. And this is an image of the dining room, which is on the left of the wall that I showed you initially. Again, very unfriendly. This dining room had, over time, an entertainment room built onto it, which would be on the left of this image. So this dining room doesn't actually have any access to natural ventilation or natural light. It's very dark, very gloomy. Fortunately, it does have the higher ceilings, so that does help to an extent. But one of the things that we wanted to do was actually open the space up to the kitchen and just try and make it friendlier and get a little bit more natural light into this space as well as into the kitchen. This is what the layout looked like, the original layout. So there's a lot of cupboard space in the kitchen, as you can see, but that island in the center just doesn't leave much space for movement and flow in the kitchen. You'll see it on the top right of the image. We've got that little passageway pantry that I showed in the image, in the photograph. And I'm presuming that that used to be a passage that entered the space from the outside. You can't widen that at all because you've got a bathroom below which needed to be retained. And there's a small little door going into the dining room, as we saw in the images. We've got on the outside wall a double sink, a dishwasher, and directly opposite that we've got the stove, which really does create a lot of congestion if you're using any of those appliances. The fridges are up in the top right of that L shape next to the pantry, so quite a far distance from the stove and from the sink. So if you remember last time we spoke about the kitchen triangle, which includes your cleaning, your cooking, and also your storage. So you can see that not very well thought through. So how we actually approached this project, a couple of things that we looked at first. So I've pre-recorded a little clip just to speed things up because we've only got a half an hour. But just I'll talk you through the thinking behind what we did with this project. So there again is the existing dining, kitchen, and pantry. Very closed up, very unfriendly. You can see there's no triangle. We've indicated the fridge, the stove, and the sink. And you can see it doesn't really even, it's more linear layout than it is a triangular layout. So that was one of the first things that we addressed. The next thing we addressed was access between the kitchen and the dining room. So fortunately with this project, we had carte blanche to, I just want to pause this. We had carte blanche to take the existing kitchen out altogether and replace it with a new kitchen. So really the things that we did look at was positions of plumbing, positions of electrical, and we wanted to retain those positions as much as possible. Other factors, which we're highlighting here, is items that we wouldn't have wanted to move, which is the window, the external door, the pantry space, and then the access to that dining room. So those were fixed parameters that we couldn't change. But it was a nice blank canvas to work with. So what we decided to do was keep the L-shape cupboard, because that is backed onto a wall, so there were no openings on that side. We retained the window on the southern side because that was the only place to put a window in, but we did put a bigger window in, and it opened sliding folding so that you could get natural ventilation in. Being open plan, we didn't need to put cupboards on the opposite side, so it left a big space to put a decent sized island. And most probably at the end of the day, we had the same amount of storage that we had with the original kitchen, but we just reconfigured it. So you can see we're keeping access to the pantry, we're keeping access to the outside, and we're also keeping access to the dining room. So those are all design triggers, or items that we had to keep in mind. So what we decided to do was keep the fridge where it was originally, so we didn't have to move any of the electrical plugs for that. We kept the dishwasher where it was, also just to save a little bit on the budget. But we did move the hob onto the back side. And the reason for that was, the reason we didn't have it on the island was we wanted to extract that hob into the roof space and out, so that we spoke about those principles of extracting to the outside air last week as well, which meant that we had space on the island to put the sink. So all in all, our triangle worked very well. We've got our cooking area. We've also then got our cleaning area. We could have put the dishwasher next to the sink on the island. That could have worked as well, but the client decided this was a better layout for his family. Then we've got our storage, which completes the triangle, and it's also kept in the same space. So that also helps. Then the two other things, we spoke about the 5 zones last week, which is the modern triangle. We've got our entertainment space on the opposite side of the island. So people from the dining room can, you can sit there, you can entertain while you're cooking. And then also lots of preparation space. So quite nicely, everything was accommodated within the space that we had. What we decided to do as well is this is the layout that we had after we'd finished designing. What we decided to do with this layout was, instead of, that entrance to the pantry was actually, it's visible because we've got an open plan now, it's actually visible to the dining room. So if I can go back to this image here, I can explain it maybe a bit better. So this was our new layout that we had once we'd redesigned the kitchen, and we'd also opened it up to the dining room. So what we decided to do was to incorporate the door into the pantry as part of the cupboard layout, so that it created a uniform look. It didn't look as though there was a door there. It actually just looked like a cupboard door. So that was what we ended up with afterwards. Once we were happy with the layout, and we'd gone back a couple of times to the client, and we'd sat around the table, really looked critically at the space and how we were redesigning it. The next step was so at this stage, keep in mind, we haven't looked at material selections yet. We've solely looked at layout and function. So the next step was to actually create some kind of idea of what it would look like. So the client decided to opt for drawers as opposed to cupboards, which I agree with. They're just a lot friendlier. A couple of weeks ago, we also spoke about trends for the year. And one of the trends that we're going into now is to move more towards telling a story. So a lot of heirlooms coming back in, a lot of pieces that have got family history and that are sentimental to the family. So we decided to incorporate a bit of display space as well, just so that they could make the space their own. We wanted to keep the countertops clear so that there's as much preparation space as possible. So some of these drawers did have the appliances in. We did integrated appliances, so you don't actually see the fridge. The fridge is hidden behind doors that are the same as the rest of the kitchen. You can see the window sticking out on the right-hand side. So that window we actually replaced, and we made it a fold open so that we can get as much ventilation going through that kitchen and through to the dining room as what we possibly could. Once this was in place and the client was happy with this, we started looking at material selection. So this was the end result. We did a couple of different options for them, but this was the first option that we did. So you can see quite a lot of display space for bringing greenery in, also displaying, it is still storage space, but more sentimental items that the client had, just also so that it's not such a, dare I say, unfriendly space. And we just compartmentalized all the storage so that it just brought a little bit of character into that space. They felt this was maybe a little bit too dark for them. They wanted to bring a little bit more timber in. So we re-looked at the materials and we came up with this one, which is the one that they ultimately decided that they were going to go with. But we also did have a look, just to show you, we looked at a lighter color palette as well. So, you know, it just shows you the value of doing the layout first and making sure that all that function is in place before you know, it's reasonably easy to change material selections, not that easy to redesign the layout once you've started, you know, further down the line and you've actually started with the technical drawings. So that was our, just to show you again, that was the original kitchen, and that is what we turned it into. So exactly the same space, but just by opening up one wall, it gives you a completely different feel. Another thing that we did is the new owner didn't like the fact that the ceilings were so high. They wanted to actually just modernize it and have flat white ceilings. So that was also something we did. You'll see in that image as well. Maybe I'll just go back to these. You'll see that we've used layered lighting, which we spoke about in our talk last week. So we've got the ceiling lights, we've got the pendant lights above the island, and we've also got LED lighting underneath the cupboards, so that that kitchen is well lit at all times. Each of these different layered lights were on different switches, so they didn't have to have everything on. They also had dimmers on them so that they didn't have to have fully bright lights at all times. I think what we're going to do today is, we were so busy with our talk last week that we didn't actually get to the questions and answers. So before I introduce next week's topic, let's just have a look. I've made a note of some of the questions that we did get last week. And I'm just going to go through a few of them. So the first one is, what is the biggest kitchen mistake you see? And I can quite convincingly say it's layout, bad layout. It causes frustration with clients. But I would say very close second would be insufficient ventilation. And I'm talking natural and artificial, and also insufficient light. So again, that's also natural and artificial. You don't want to be in your kitchen during the day and have to turn the lights on. There should be enough natural light coming from outside that you don't need to turn the lights on. Just keep in mind again that the artificial ventilation, the mechanical ventilation for the hob, extremely important to ventilate that to the outside. And that really does determine where that hob position is, just depending on your design and what look and feel you're actually going for. Right. Let's have a look. How much should I spend on a kitchen? So generally, the rule of thumb is between 5 and 10% of your build price if you're building new. But it depends on your space. It depends how much space you've got, and also it depends on the quality you're going for. If you're going extremely high end, it will definitely increase that. A kitchen is one of the most expensive rooms in the house, you know, because it's got a lot of plumbing, it's got a lot of electrical, a lot of built-in appliances. So keep that in mind as well. Is open plan kitchen always better? And I would say no. It depends on how the family lives. It depends, do they entertain a lot? We also had instances where if you are designing for embassies, for instance, they don't like open plan kitchens because they entertain a lot and they've got a lot of staff that are in that kitchen preparing meals for the guests, and they want that to be separate. So what we did a lot of for the embassies was we would have sliding or pocket doors, as you call it. So when there was no function on, you could open the pocket doors and have the open plan. And then you would close them off when there was a function so that those staff were not visible for the guests. Right. Are handleless kitchens practical? They are. I do like handleless kitchens. It gives you that sleek, clean look. But just be careful of fingerprints and maintenance. So nothing wrong with handles. It just depends on personal taste. Again, just be careful of those two things. This we discussed last week. What's better, drawers or cupboards? For me, drawers win every time. Unless you're working, let's say, underneath the sink. Then, if you've got plumbing fixtures, then cupboards are better. But in all other instances, for me, a drawer is a lot better. We're not going to talk too much about that because we did cover it quite extensively last week. Let's see what else we had. What's the most underrated feature in kitchens? I think we touched on this last week as well, lighting. But for me personally, I would say natural light and natural ventilation. You must ensure that you've got a window in that kitchen. For me, it's crucial. It's one of the most important aspects of the kitchen. Is it worth keeping the same kitchen layout to save money? Now, you can keep portions of it only if it makes sense. If you've got, what's an example that I can use? Let's say, for instance, you've got cupboards along one side and you've got your fridge, your stove and your sink all in one line, but you do have an island that you can utilize. So I'm not talking about an apartment that, a small apartment only has that. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a home that has a kitchen that has got enough space to actually put appliances on the island or put appliances underneath the window. That is important. So rather spend money moving plumbing or moving electrical if you are going to improve the layout substantially. That would be my advice. This is an interesting question. What should I never DIY in a kitchen design? And I would say the planning. Get the planning right. Go to a professional and go and have a look at kitchen layouts in showrooms. You'll very quickly see what you do like and what you don't like. Open the drawers, get a feel for it. Have a look at the latest appliances, the latest fixtures, taps, handles, under counter lights, for instance. All those things, once your kitchen is in, it's expensive to redo it. Rather spend the time on the planning, hence our name, Plan First. It is very, very important to plan first. What else? Do we have any other questions that I've missed? Oh, here's one. Should I follow trends or play it safe? One's got to be careful with trends because they do come and go. I would say, just be careful with that. Just keep it in mind for resale purposes. You never know what life's going to throw at you, and you might think it's your forever home, and a year or two later you might need to sell or move, and then it's not everyone's taste. So we do have clients that have come to us exactly with that, and they need to urgently renovate their kitchen because they need to sell unforeseen circumstances. And then they scramble to just make the kitchen a little bit more neutral so that it doesn't reduce the pool of buyers for them. And I think that is it for this week. I'll just, next week's topic is going to be extremely exciting. We're going to have Jib with us next week, and they're going to be talking about their curve line product, as well as acoustics in a home. So we'll have Brian and Richard with us from Jib next week, and we look forward to that topic. So get your questions ready. Again, as I always say, you're welcome to contact us on our Facebook page or our website, our 0800 number. And we'll see you all again next week. Thanks so much for joining.